Oh, I mean, you definitely have close calls with things that get your heart rate up for sure. But to be honest, it's not really something that's going through your mind. You're just focused on, the next corner, the process where you're going to brake, getting the exit right, and you're not thinking about all those things. And it's all happening so fast, you don't really have time to look too wide and sort of think about all the what ifs. You just need to focus on your job. It's exactly, like any other sport, trying to kick a goal at a penalty shootout. You're not looking around and thinking about all the other things. You just need to focus on your process and kicking that ball and where it's going to go. And it's the same thing when you're in the bubble in that car. That's really all you're focused on.
G'day and welcome back to Real Risk, the adventure podcast. Now, for those who enjoy video podcasts, I've engaged with Podbooth here in Adelaide to produce the show, and I'm really excited about how it's going to work. For those who listen in the car or on your daily walk, the audio files, of course, will still be available. My name's Richard Harris, and you might remember me from my involvement in the 2018 Thai Cave Rescue. Well, that adventure has led to many other exciting opportunities, including the chance to chat with like-minded adventurers and risk-takers on this podcast. There's lots of exciting things to announce over the course of the season, and plenty of brilliant, daring, adventurous and thoughtful guests already lined up. There'll be more extreme athletes, more divers, more soldiers, more people who get off on going fast, climbing high or challenging themselves in ways most of us can't even dream of. And all of them will talk to us about why they think the benefits outweigh the dangers, why risk is integral to making us stronger, more resilient and better able to cope with the stresses of daily life. And let's face it, when has that ever been more important? I've been chasing this exceptional athlete for some time, and she's proven extremely difficult to pin down. Molly Taylor is an Australian rally driver who is hot property in the world of motorsports. Her passport must be feeling pretty bruised and battered, a bit like her after the thrills and spills during her career. 2021 has been an extraordinary year, rallying in every corner of the globe, from the World Rally Championships in Estonia and Greece to the Extreme E Series in places like Sardinia, Senegal and Saudi. She's experiencing huge successes, but also taking some big hits in what can be an unforgiving sport. She has literally just finished in yet another type of cross-country race in the Abu Dhabi Desert Challenge. I caught her in a rare moment in Australia to learn about her amazing life in motorsport. Enjoy the chat with Molly Taylor. Molly, thank you very much for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
I'm pretty pleased to finally pin you down. You sound like you've had an extraordinarily busy year, and fitting me into your schedule has not been easy. So it's really, really good to have you back home in Australia and to be able to have a chat with you.
Yeah, it's fantastic to be back home, and it's taken us a while to be able to, as you say, put this together, but I'm really glad we were able to finally make it happen. And yeah, after a long time away, it's just nice to be on home soil again and be back home and see the family.
Now, are you in Sydney or around Sydney?
I'm in Sydney, yes, for this week, and then I'm actually living in Melbourne. So my family's in Sydney, so spending a week with them and then heading back home for 1 week as well.
Well, I was worried that you were going to be racing off to Monza. I think the last round of the WRC is in Monza this weekend, isn't it?
Yeah, that's correct. So I won't be there, unfortunately, but we've got some really, really busy December and January planned. So there'll be plenty of racing action still happening.
Good to hear. Well, I've been following your year on KO and other online streaming services, watching what you've been up to, and you've certainly been having an exciting time. But just to those who aren't familiar with you or rally so much, I'm just going to run through a couple of highlights just to give people an idea of what sort of legend we're talking to today, because it is pretty impressive, your resume. And correct me if I'm wrong, but it looks like the first big moment for you was winning your class in the New South Wales Rally Championship in 2006. Would that be the big kickoff?
A long time ago. Yeah, I've been doing it for a while, but yeah, I think so. That's where it all started for me. Just doing our local championships, and really, I suppose from there you get a bit of a taste for it and a taste for the competition, and enjoy trying to win and keep trying to do that.
That was just the start of your success, because it wasn't long before you were winning stages and classes in the Australian Rally Championship, and then in 2015 you became the first woman to win a stage, and then the next year the outright winner of the Australian Rally Championship, the youngest person and the first woman to do both those things. So that, I guess, is when things went a bit off the scale, I would imagine, in terms of people seeking you out and you coming to other people's attention.
Yeah, I think for me, 2016 was the first year with Subaru Australia. So my first time doing it professionally with, rather than trying to find all the sponsors and supporters and, building the car in your garage at home and that sort of thing, to be able to do it actually as a profession in that first year. So that was a big step for me. And then to be able to win the championship as well was a pretty, good way to finish off that season, and then continue on with Subaru. But that was a real pivotal point, I think, in my career, to be able to take it from something that was still at a high level and still with a lot of sponsors and partners and everyone making it happen, but to take it from a hobby or what you're working during the day to fund on the weekends, to actually have it as a job is a big, I guess, a change mentally and in every way you go about it.
Now, I like to take the moment at this, the opportunity at this sort of moment to point out, my own skill set in the motor racing arena. Brilliant. Because I thought you'd be sitting in a room full of trophies and things, but so I got my biggest one that I've got.
Still my mum's sewing machine in the back.
That's right. So this is the Track Time Motorsport 2020 Rookies Series third place trophy, which is the pinnacle of my motorsport career so far. But I'm just on.
I've got one that looks like that.
I'm just on the learning curve. So, but I imagine you must have quite a few of these little trinkets by now.
Yes, always trying to add to the collection. It's never enough, though. That's
what it's all about. is the bling. So take us back to the start, Molly. You've come from two generations previously of rally and motorsport people in the family. Tell us about that and where it all kicked off.
Yeah, so I guess it started with my grandfather. He started rallying, and my mum started co-driving for him when she was 18. And he was fast, but he used to crash a lot. and my mum, she took to it straight from that moment, and then progressed her career and did it professionally up until recently, really, and has won 4 Australian titles as a co-driver with the Toyota factory team. So for me, growing up, my dad also used to rally a lot, and that's how my parents met. My dad used to rally a XY GT Falcon among many other cars, and was quite a spectacle in the forest with that big car. So that was my upbringing, I suppose, being surrounded by it. And it was my mum's day job, was to go rallying. So probably a unique perspective growing up, having that perception of what your parents do for a living and thinking that's completely normal, and not realising how unique she was in that field. So from there, I always followed motorsport, but it wasn't until I got my licence for the road that I actually drove a rally car for the first time. And that was really not to pursue a career, but just to do it as a driver training exercise. My dad wanted us to have good car control, be competent with manual and all those sort of things, just to be a safer driver on the road. So that's how it started. And then I had a drive of the car, and I realised why my family was so in love with it and why they pursued so much of their time in the sport, and started there. So it wasn't, I never did go karting or any of those things. When I was younger, I wanted to be an Olympian horse rider. So I don't know where that came from, but that was just randomly the passion I picked up when I was younger, not motorsport. So I was a bit of a late bloomer, and got the bug from there, and pursued it ever since.
Did you grow up in a rural environment or in Sydney? Or
we grew up in Sydney, and when I was just before high school, we moved out to like semi-rural, so small acreage. Nothing with we had some paddocks, but nothing with an actual track or anything, just paddocks with horses and that sort of thing.
I was thinking about the horses. I guess most country kids grow up driving around the paddocks, and they sort of have that edge. And I spoke to David Brabham in one of my interviews who had that experience, living under the shadow of his father, Jack Brabham. But they grew up on a farm, and he just describes going sideways through gates in his ute, and just came completely naturally to be driving like that around the property and then out on the country roads. And I was lucky enough, whilst I was a city boy, to have that experience as a kid, to go out to farms and learn to drive in paddocks and things. So it certainly gives you an edge, and I feel a bit sad for kids who don't get to do that at a young age, let alone don't ever get to drive a manual car, which I am highly disapproving of, and made sure my daughter and my sons could drive manual cars so that they could get themselves out of strife if their friends can't drive them home.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, learning that car control is fundamental to not just motorsport, but just being a competent driver. So that was very much part of our upbringing, to make sure we were competent drivers on the road. It just never was really an intention to convert that to the competition side.
Did you meet your grandfather? Did you know him?
Yes.
Is he still alive?
Yeah. He was he used to ring me up. He's unfortunately passed away now, but he used to ring me up when I was overseas competing, and ring up and say, I told you not to use that brake. All it does is slow you down. I think it was his philosophy when he went rallying, and I don't think he finished many rallies due to that philosophy. So I would always laugh and go, yep, yeah, no problem.
Well, is there a little bit of a genetic
I'll stay
thing?
off the brake.
Is there a little genetic thing going on there, Molly? Because I noticed from stalking you on YouTube and so forth, you are very fast and have done very well, but you are also not immune to a few good crashes along the way.
Yeah, look, I think that's just the nature of any sport that you do, or anything that you do. You never, kick the ball in the goal every time or shoot the hoop perfectly every time. In motorsport, just the consequence of getting it wrong is just so much more dramatic, because you're trying to drive on that fine line. And I think it's many famous drivers over the years have quoted, if you don't crash, you're not going fast enough because you're not close enough to the limit. So it's obviously something we don't want to do and we try to minimize, but it's very much, a part of the sport. Getting it wrong, learning from it, and trying to move on and be better and not make the same mistakes again. But there's always a few battle scars.
Well, having done now a couple of years of initially track days and now some circuit racing in historic touring cars, I sort of understand that you do need to find the limit. But of course, on a circuit, it's pretty forgiving. You just, suddenly you're on the bitumen, next minute you're in the dirt. But in rally, you just can't really afford to find those limits in many respects. And that's why I think I would not have the courage and certainly not the skill to do rally, although I hugely admire, people like yourself who have that car control. But it's so close to the limit so much of the time. And there's one accident, was it Ballarat or Estonia, when you hit that bale in front of the tree? I mean, you come to a very sudden stop there, and how you guys jumped out of that car and walked away. We're digressing and jumping around, but what does it feel like to crash the car so hard? And then,
yeah, I mean, not great. There was quite a few G's in that one. I think, as you say, it's not like a circuit where you have the runoff and all those parameters built into the track. We're driving down a forest road next to trees and trying to drive as fast as we can and try to manage that limit. But obviously, if you're keeping too much in reserve, then you're going to be slow, and the opposite, you'll also be slow because you'll be stopped. So, yeah, I mean, I think in those moments, it's, you're trying so hard to always look for the way out of something, look for where you want to go and all those sort of things. And then I think for me, it's just the overwhelming disappointment when something like that happens, because the ramifications, the consequences, how much resource and how much of a team behind you are putting into getting you to that point, and the pressure to perform, and it's just overwhelming disappointment, and you just, it's a not necessarily fear of the crash itself. It's just the frustration that it happened.
You guys only have one car, I presume, for the season most of the time, and maybe backup motors and gearboxes and things. But a crash like that's a season-ending event, is it for you?
Look, it depends. The cars are incredibly strong, and if the roll cage itself is fine, it's amazing. Pretty much our team can rebuild most things in the service park. So be surprised with what you can repair and continue on. Certainly, it can be fixed for the next event. But yeah, the plan is to always try and stay in the rally. So there's, the guys can do a lot of magic in that service park to keep us going. Not always, but a lot of the time we can work out something.
Let's just have a bit of a think about the cars and how they've changed. You mentioned the XY Falcon. Of course, they're in the historic touring cars racing on the circuit, and I'm used to them thundering past with the V8s, thundering past my right ear while I'm in my little Mini down the straight, which is a pretty frequent occurrence. So, but on the gravel, they just must have been terrifying to drive.
Yeah, I think he was a crowd favourite because the car is just so big and loud, and was just sideways everywhere with rooster tails coming up the back, and you can see old videos, and I've been at events where people still have these memories like it was yesterday. I think they used to all line up and kind of bow to Dad as he drove through, and he would obviously always put on a show and chuck it a bit more sideways, and that's why he did it. He loved the spectacle and the thrill of driving a car like that. It wasn't the fastest, but it was a lot of fun, and I think the crowds used to hang around just to watch that car go through.
Actually, the Mini would have been quite competitive against the XY, I suspect, out in the forest.
Yeah, I mean, a lot more efficient, definitely.
Yeah. So now it's all changed from those big rear-wheel drive, powerful cars through to some front-wheel drive cars, and now quite small all-wheel drive cars. What's that driving? I've never been in an all-wheel drive car in anger. What's that driving experience like compared to the different. I think you had a Gemini early on, a rear-wheel drive, and then probably front-wheel drive cars. What's changed in terms of how that feels? And
yeah, I mean, rear-wheel drive cars are a lot of fun because you're sliding around a lot more from the rear, but they're not as efficient and not as fast. So front-wheel drive, again, is more efficient. You can carry more speed. You can get on the power earlier. And then all-wheel drive, again, you just have a lot more grip. So they're definitely, especially when you're talking about driving on a loose surface, it's all about how much traction you can keep. So that's where all-wheel drives really have a massive advantage.
So tell us a bit about the modern cars that we see in World Rally class, and tell us about some of the features of those.
Yeah, I mean, the regulations are actually just changing. So from next year, the World Rally cars will actually be a hybrid. So that's going to be really fascinating to see. And there's a lot of work that's being done in how these hybrids will work, and you'll get extra boosts of power for a certain amount of times at certain points, and you can kind of work a strategy of how you implement that extra power. So, but yeah, generally at the moment they're relatively, it's like small engine, 4-cylinder, turbocharged, with a lot of aero, a lot of suspension development. So they have a lot of suspension travel, massive brakes, and the speed and the grip that these cars have is just unreal. And yeah, I think it's going to be really exciting now into the future, seeing how we can build the hybrid technology and the electric technology, and as the automotive landscape changes, how motorsport's changing with that too.
Well, we'll talk a bit in a minute about how you've already got the edge from driving this year in the Extreme E series in these monstrous electric things that look like remote controlled cars from Land of the Giants is how I would describe them, but they look like a lot of fun. But let's go back to a bit earlier. So when you started driving a little bit at your dad's rally school, got the passion for it, and then who sort of pushed you in the direction of getting a car organised and having your first go? Do you remember those first couple of events and what that looked like?
Yeah, I mean, my first event was actually, I was still at boarding school in New South Wales, and the president of the local car club, who was had previous state champion, a rally friend, and he signed me out of boarding school and took me to this basically big skid pan that they had in Armidale for training the fireys and that sort of thing. And they set up a motorcarter there, and he let me borrow his 1970-something Honda Civic and do a motorcarter, which is basically just, first and second gear, and driving in different ways around witches' hats. So that was, my first competitive experience, and just had such a ball. And then from there, my parents being incredibly supportive, so they definitely didn't push me into it at all, but they could see that there was some passion there, and helped me out with the Holden Gemini, which was a very much entry level. I think it had about 60 horsepower and a great way to start, and then sold my horse to keep going basically.
My sister had a Holden Gemini, and when I was 16 and got my license, I borrowed it, and remember to try and do a big burnout in it and completely trash the clutch.
I'm not sure they do big burnouts.
No, they can't. That's what I found. So my memory of the Gemini was me destroying the clutch and having a lot of strife from my older sister. But so you were about 16 or 17 then, I guess?
Yeah, it was about that age. Yeah, just finishing up high school and getting into motorsport.
So at what point did you think, I can do this for a living?
I mean, I guess that's always the dream, to do it as your job. But I think it was probably, not until when I was when I went over to the UK and lived over there and started competing and had a few opportunities over there. And as it sort of progressed, you start to see possibilities to do that, but it's never guaranteed. And it's just, you need to be in the right place at the right time and have had the right performance as well. And so many things need to align. So it was always the dream, but I don't think it's not necessarily like another sport where, if you reach a threshold, if you can run 100 meters at a certain pace, then you're going to be on the team or things like that. Motorsport, you need to combine so many more elements that really it's never guaranteed, no matter how much you want it.
And that trip to Britain sounds like it was pretty productive. I think you got a scholarship to the FIA's World Rally Championship.
Yeah, so I moved over to the after I finished school, and then had a year in Australia, and then moved to the UK and competed in the British Championship for 2 years in some single one make categories, and through being over there got the opportunity to try out for a selection for it was called the Pirelli Star Driver program, and that was essentially, as you say, a scholarship into what was effectively the junior championship in the World Rally Series, which was something, with my resources and budget was unattainable, but through this scholarship, made it possible. So that was a massive turning point, winning one of the places in that selection.
And what does that look like? Do they give you a car and a team to support you for some races or a period of time?
Yeah, exactly. So it was a one-make series. So it was all with Ford Fiestas run by M Sport, the factory, the Ford team over in England. And so essentially they would build, transport the cars to the events, and you turned up with your helmet and went as hard as you can.
Oh, so it's already starting to feel like a bit of a rock star at that point, I imagine.
That was a pretty cool experience to turn up at a world championship event for the first time. Was amazing.
It's only downhill for a while from there, I imagine, when you got to get back on the tools yourself, looking after your own cars from intermittently thereafter, I suppose, at different times.
Yeah, I mean, I think rallying always keeps you grounded because it's not a glamorous sport, and there's definitely perks and things you love about it, but a lot of the time you're in the dirt trying to fix stuff, and it'll quickly bring you back down to earth. So I don't think you can be too aloof when you're in rallying.
Tell us about the relationship with the co-driver. They don't call them navigators anymore. The word co-driver seems to be quite carefully used, and I imagine part of that is to give them the credit they deserve for what is a very skilled role. But I cannot think of anything more frightening than sitting not behind the steering wheel of a rally car. I mean, I have huge respect for those people.
Yeah, we often say they're really the crazy ones because, at least we have a wheel and are in some sort of control of our own destiny, whereas they've got no controls on their side. So it definitely takes a unique type of person. But as you said, it's a really unique and kind of hard to describe the total skill that's involved in a co-driver, but they really are driving the car with you, and they have to be almost in your head and giving you the right information at exactly the right time. And right, if you're on this flow, if you're on a circuit driving around a track and you're in this flow, the co-driver needs to be on a rally stage in that with you. So it's that relationship is very, very important, and that understanding and the cohesion between. So it's really a whole nother element.
The language that they speak is unintelligible to anyone except even the driver themselves, because I think sometimes you have your own kind of code between the two of you, don't you? It's not a universal language.
That's correct. A lot of drivers use the same base or system, but then it is really what the driver interprets that road to be. So everyone perceives everything with their own perception. So for me, if I use 1 to 6, my 1 to 6 might not be exactly someone else's. So it's very much my pace notes are unique to me, just as anyone else's pace notes are unique to them. So it's not even something you really can, at the top level, when you're trying to really maximize all those tiny edges and commit to the pace notes 100%, it's very much a individual thing.
So you don't want to change co-drivers too often. It would make it difficult to relearn the language.
Yeah, it definitely makes it more difficult, and more so because you need to learn the way you both work and the rhythm, because some drivers might want the pace notes a little bit early and they can store that in their memory for a bit longer. Other drivers might want it a little bit later, and so they're not thinking too far ahead. And so really that whole relationship, it's possible I've changed co-drivers among the years, and there's a lot of professional co-drivers who can jump in and do a very good job, but there's certainly an advantage for staying with someone and building that over a longer period of time.
Can you just tell me what brake 64 right minus means?
So the brake is a reference for your braking point. So I will use that if I'm coming for a very fast section or something's a bit unseen. So I'm just saying on that 60 meters, so 60 is a distance. So brake 60, so brake at the start or early on in the 60 meters. If I had the brake after the 60, it would be meaning brake to the latter part of the 60 meters. And then the 4 minus is a corner. So 3 is more or less, a square corner, and then 4 would be a bit faster. So that would be a fourth gear corner. Minus is it's just a little bit tighter than a generic 4.
Oh, so 6 is a long sweeping bend.
Yeah, 6 is flat out.
Okay, good. Okay. I was watching one of the videos, I think you with your co-driver in the Ballarat stage of the ALC perhaps, and just listening to the language and trying to see on the road what the next thing coming was, and it was completely I couldn't understand a word of it. And
it's tricky to follow along
unless they say something like bridge or
so a clock face. So if you imagine the clock hands at 6, it's between 12 and 6, it's fairly open, and then at 3 o'clock it's a 90 degree. So very roughly, that's where the numbers come from, those angles.
Lost many co-drivers through overzealous driving and failed to inspire confidence.
Not that they've told me.
Suddenly someone's not available this weekend.
Yeah, I mean, I think I've been lucky and I've been able to work with very good, very experienced people. And, we have that kind of relationship where we can tell each other if we don't think the other person is doing the right thing, or, if the co-driver says something and I listen, and vice versa. So yeah, you're very much, both wanting the same thing out of it. So I think that being able to listen and appreciate and understand and respect each other's paramount. So I've been very lucky to have some very good co-drivers.
It's just struck me, it's a bit like the relationship between a surgeon and an anaesthetist. There has to be a huge amount of mutual trust and respect, because if either one of them's not doing a good job, then the patient's the one who suffers, and in your case, the car, and you are the ones who suffer.
Yeah, 100%. I think the only person that's probably said they don't want to be my co-driver is my dad when I take him for a run. But you're also trying to play it up a bit and impress him, so he probably gets a few wild stages when he jumps in the car.
A bit quicker than the XY, probably. That's the problem. So
Yeah,
what
exactly.
what about your parents? Were they ever concerned about you going into rally driving, or were they 100%, encouraging you to follow your dreams?
They've always been really supportive of and emphasizing, I suppose, the importance of finding what you're passionate about and then following that. So even when I was really passionate about horse riding, they would always support me in what I wanted to do. And I think, to be honest, they were more concerned for my safety when I was horse riding, because the statistics on horse riding are far worse than rallying. But I mean, for sure, there's risk with everything. So that's something that we try to mitigate as much as we can, and we make sure we've got all the right equipment and the cars are incredibly safe. And that goes with anything that you do. But they understand the sport. They know how much safety is involved. They know it's calculated risk what we're doing, and they know the sport intimately. And I think they're probably more nervous on the start line about me doing a good job, because they know how much I put into it, and they know what pressures are involved. They know what's on the line, and they want to see me do well. So I think they're more nervous on that side of things.
Apart from, I agree with you about horses, by the way, having worked in, sort of the emergency services and in trauma and stuff. I've certainly seen a lot more disasters from people coming off a horse than off pretty much anything else. Maybe motorbikes are a close second or the same, but certainly not from motorsport. Doesn't seem to be a very frequent occurrence that people in cars in motorsport, have a very serious incident. Definitely can't say the same for horse or motorcycles. Putting aside the obvious passion that you have for the sport and doing a good job in a car at high speeds, in terms of the risk itself, obviously there are some very obvious dangers, and you've faced those in the few times you've had serious rollovers or collisions. What are the benefits to you, do you think, of the risk per se? Do you think it's good for us to do stuff like this that's a bit edgy and a bit dangerous?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's, obviously there's a limit and a line for everything, and there's a lot of common sense and discretion that you have to use with everything. But I suppose it's like, if I look at other sports, if I look at someone skydiving, I couldn't imagine to do that, because I don't know how to do it, and I don't know the skills, and I don't know the risk profile. To me, it looks incredibly risky, but to those guys that jump every single day, it's a process now, and they're ticking off one step by one step, and their actual risk profile is extremely low. So I think there's a lot of that understanding, developing your skill, knowing your sport, everything then becomes a process, and what you're doing, what can go wrong. If something, if one of the things isn't done correctly, and you're planning and analysing for all of that. So what might look incredibly risky, if you take someone for a passenger ride on a track you've done, their first time around that track might look insanely risky, and you're going millimetres from trees. But if you've done that 20 times, and exactly where you need to be and what you need to do, your risk, I mean, for sure, anything can happen and something can break or whatever, but generally, your risk profile, and you're mitigating everything, and you're in control. So I think it comes down a lot to that, and your experience and ability to be able to manage those situations, which might look like a huge risk to someone who isn't intimately involved with all those steps.
Is there anything in rallying that does frighten you? Is there any particular scenario or anything that you do think about and worry about?
Oh, I mean, you definitely have close calls with things that get your heart rate up, for sure. But to be honest, it's not really something that's going through your mind. You're just focused on, the next corner of the process where you're going to brake, getting the exit right, and you're not thinking about all those things. And it's all happening so fast, you don't really have time to look too wide and sort of think about all the what ifs. You just need to focus on your job. It's exactly, like any other sport, trying to kick a goal at a penalty shootout. You're not looking around and thinking about all the other things. You just need to focus on your process and kicking that ball and where it's going to go. And it's the same thing when you're in the bubble in that car. That's really all you're focused on.
Just thinking about, as a female in very much still a male-dominated sport, rally seems is it particularly heavily male-dominated compared to even other branches of motorsports?
Yeah, we're getting quite a few female co-drivers and some more drivers, but it certainly is still male-dominated, and hopefully that's beginning to change, and in future generations will be even more equal. But yeah, it's certainly still male-dominated.
When I saw in one of your interviews, you made the comment that, it's just down to the stopwatch and it doesn't matter what gender you are. You're either fastest or you're not fastest. And so it is the great equaliser, motorsport. And, it doesn't depend on strength, size, anything apart from reflexes, skill and daring, I guess, to a degree. And so there should be no gender difference. But I guess traditionally, women have been less inclined to tinker with cars as kids and have that interest. So... and maybe, you've been particularly lucky to have parents who showed you the opportunities and what the possibilities were. So I saw a couple of comments on some of the YouTube videos, and you've probably had a bit of criticism or a few people having a go at you in your role as an elite motorsport female. Do you think it's the risk taking that people... Is that the reason people's eyebrows will still go up, that here's a girl doing this? What is it that make people still show that kind of bigotry about the fact that there's a girl doing so well?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I think thankfully it's a small percentage. So, I mean, overwhelmingly there's a lot of support and everyone wants to see more females do well and succeed. And the more females that do well and succeed, the more it reinforces the fact that it is possible and there shouldn't be a difference. But for sure, you're not going to please everybody. And I think it's, as you say, it's that, inclination, particularly, as younger girls, not tinkering with cars because they're not encouraged to, because it's not seen as something it's something that females should do. So I think a lot of it is just an older mindset that still, deep down doesn't think it's a place for women. So I think the biggest thing that we can do is to be opening up those perceptions and changing those ideas with young kids. And I think that I'm sort of the living example of that, because I grew up in a completely different environment where it was completely normal for my mum to do that. And I never sort of had to, I guess, wrestle with the thought that, but that's not what girls do, because I thought that's what girls did, maybe more than men, because my mum was doing it as a profession and my dad was just doing it as a hobby. So I never had to sort of overcome that barrier. And it's only then when you're involved and people ask you about them, you sort of sit back and think, oh, wait a minute, this isn't necessarily every normal upbringing that people are exposed to. So yeah, I think it's switching that mindset is really important.
Can you think of any standout moments when being a female drew unwanted attention or negativity in the course of your career?
I think there has been some, comments about, not wanting to get beaten by a girl, and you got beaten by a girl and that sort of thing. But to be honest, I think especially as you go up the levels in motorsport, the respect amongst the drivers is there, no matter if you're male or female and whatever. If you're out there on the stages doing the times, everyone in the cars knows what's involved to do that, and no one really cares what gender you are. I think it's more when you're going up the ranks and everyone's trying to prove themselves, and there's maybe a bit more younger egos out there, or there's people on the outside of the sport who have their own opinions. But within the motorsport community, particularly at the professional level, everyone's professional. And if you're professional, you're one of the others, or one of the boys, or just, everyone gets on with the job. And definitely it's nice to see more and more of that happening.
And there seems to be quite a move from Motorsport Australia, for example, to encourage women into motorsport at the moment, isn't there? Are you involved in that at all?
Yeah, certainly. So the Girls on Track program that I'm involved with is essentially going out to girls anywhere between 8 and 18 to schools, or having them come to workshops, come to the track and just experience all the different elements and jobs and opportunities in motorsport. So the driving, but also from the engineering, mechanics, logistics, media, all the facets. And the idea is, as we spoke about, just to show females that there are females in these roles doing well. It is an option for them, and the doors are open. And I think we're seeing some fantastic results from that. Just these girls that have never been exposed to motorsport before and wouldn't have without this program, suddenly realizing how cool it is and what we all know and what we all love about it, and to be able to share that with more people in a really open environment is it's amazing.
Well, you can talk the talk, but in 2016 you actually walked the walk when you won the Australian Rally Championship. Tell us about that last stage and that moment when you were crowned with that title.
Yeah, it was a bit surreal actually, because obviously it was always our target and wanting to win a championship, but I didn't think it would come in our first year with Subaru. And to be honest, it was really we weren't running a car that was the outright fastest. We're running a fairly standard specification, so we were just trying to be consistent every race. So it was never really on the target to win. We thought a top 5 would be great, and then through attrition and we were able to in the end come out on top through consistency, which isn't, I guess, we'd all want to be the first over the finish line and take the title, and we came very close the following year with a big lead in the championship, and then suffered a mechanical issue and didn't finish the championship. So I guess that's the way motorsport goes, and it's a lesson in consistency, and the points win championships, not necessarily race wins. So yeah, it was all a bit surprising actually, because coming into that event, we were a really outside chance for the championship, and we didn't really think it was possible. And unfortunately, it was due to mistakes and issues that other people had. So yeah, it was an interesting dynamic, but still, in the end of the day, it was the championship, and we finished with the most points. And it was a great. I took a lot away from that experience in terms of how to focus on consistency and focus on the big picture, as well as trying to win rallies. And
Bill Hayes was your co-driver, I think, for that. Is he an experienced guy, like been around forever and helped mentor you in a way for that, or was he kind of similar age and experience to you?
No, Bill has been around for quite a while. He'll listen to this and get angry at me for calling him old. He's not old, but he's very experienced. He's co-driven for the Subaru factory team back when the 10 years prior to when I jumped in with Subaru, when they were winning the championships back then. And he's also co-driven for Alistair McRae, the late Colin McRae's brother. So he was very experienced, and it was great for me to be stepping into that environment as a factory team and all the pressure that goes along with that, to have someone who'd been there before that could help guide me through it.
The year before, when you won that one of the stages or the heats in the Australian Rally Championship, you were awarded the Peter Brock Medal for kind of being an all-rounder, good sports person, and also helping promote the sport and so forth. Did you ever meet Peter Brock?
Yes, I did. I didn't spend a lot of time with him, but through Mum and Neil, who she co-drove for, I had the opportunity to meet him a few times, and that was pretty surreal. And I think that's still, it's still an incredible moment, and something that took me by surprise a lot, and to be able to be recognised with that medal, and also the other drivers that have been recognised before me at that point was, I was definitely pinching myself that night.
Yeah, I mean, I was just thinking that must have been a particularly special moment, having that award, and I was hoping you'd say you'd met Peter. Obviously, growing up as a boy, he was one of the guys I was just always watching at Bathurst, and I think he's just been a hero to so many young Australians and older ones, including myself now. So was that one of the more special moments in your career to date?
Yeah, I was quite young the last time I remember, but I have a very clear memory in an underground car park in Tasmania during one of the Tiger Tasmanias that Mum and Neil were competing at, and Peter was as well. And I remember just walking through the car park, he was walking past and shook his hand. So I remember as a young girl too, he was so approachable to everyone, and came and shook my hand, and we said hello. And then I remember Mum telling me at a later date that they were speaking, and he commented on what lovely children she had, and I remember being very proud that he made a comment like that to Mum.
Yeah, well, I can tell you as a parent, that's exactly what you want to hear as a parent. It doesn't happen often enough. That's great. So what happened after the championship? Did things really change for you? Did some people come knocking, or what was it like?
Yeah, there was definitely, I think it was really good for the profile of rallying to get some more mainstream media coverage and promote our sport. So it was great for Subaru as well, for us to be back after a hiatus of them being out of the championship in a factory capacity. To come back in with a win was fantastic. So it gave us a lot more momentum going forward. And as I said, the next year was a really good year for us performance wise. And we thought we were going to go back to back. And I guess that's the cruel thing of the sport. You never know when it's going to go your way or not. So learn a lot of lessons on the both sides of the fence. But it gave us a lot of momentum and a lot of confidence for me and also as a team.
So you had a couple of bit tougher years after that with some crashes and not doing as well as you hoped. Coffs Harbour, and then of course the bushfires, and then the COVID.
Yeah. So it was a tough, I guess, exit for that program. Not obviously not going as well as we hoped. But I think that's the thing about motorsport. It's very unpredictable and you're living on the edge. So you take the wins when you can get them, and you appreciate just how hard it is to put everything together to be in that position, because that's what everyone's trying to do and only one person can win. So there's a lot of heartache and heartbreaking stories for every success story, more heartbreaking stories than the successful ones. It's just the high of those successful ones keeps you going for a bit longer.
Well, I can tell you from my brief experience, the lows have definitely outweighed the highs with the amount of time with the car off the road and broken engines and clutches. And, when you first get a car and you start sort of trying to work on it, just everything is hopeless and breaks. And it's taken me a full year to kind of complete a weekend of racing. So, of course, notwithstanding the massive success I've had, I'm looking forward to next year hopefully having a bit more of a reliable car. So I can't imagine the stress and strain you put on your vehicles, what it takes to have a competitive and reliable car out on the track for a full season. I'm sort of just starting to get a tiny sense of the effort that's involved in that. So it must be nice to have a team around you rather than you and a mate with a toolbox full of spanners like that's my level at the moment, hoping to kind of keep the thing going.
I mean, that's where we all start, and that's, I guess, where you learn the graft and develop the passion for it all. And then the highs are so high and the lows are so lows, and it's really the sport of all extremes. But as you say, it's really a team sport. So to have a group of people that are working as hard as you and are invested as hard as you, and how many different areas and elements you have to get right and put together to win. So I think that's also makes it such a more incredible feeling when it does go well, because it's not just you've put in your training and you've done a good job. Everyone's done that, and everyone's done that together, and that's very special to share with more people rather than just yourself. So that's one of the things that I love about the sport.
Now, can you, just as we finish up a bit, can you tell me about this year? Because I've had a lot of trouble sort of working out where on earth is Molly Taylor this week, and your passport must be looking like it's a bit bruised and battered. Tell us what you've been up to.
Yeah, I sound really dodgy when I go through customs, because they ask me where I've been and where I'm going, and I have to sit there and bring out my phone and look at my calendar and check what's happening. It's been pretty crazy, but so I've been competing in the brand new Extreme E series, which is, as I said, all new. It's just started this year, and it's an all electric championship. We run with electric SUVs in different remote locations all over the world, and it's kind of like off-road / rallycross. So we race head to head with other vehicles on these tracks that have been set up in these locations. So they're not a set track exactly. We kind of make them up through the terrain that we're on, and it's as well as racing, it's to highlight climate change. So we go to these areas that have been affected by climate change. We've been to the glaciers in Greenland, and we've been to Africa and Saudi Arabia and the island Sardinia in Italy. So all these locations to promote sustainable motorsport and to use the platform to try and help spread the awareness of what we can do and how we can use sport to also tackle climate change. So it's a pretty cool program to be a part of. And through that, going over to Europe, and then with the COVID situation, especially with the borders back in Australia, I've basically spent the last 6 months with a suitcase traveling through Europe to these events, and through that as well, being able to add on some other rallies and do a few rounds of the World Rally Championship with M Sport, the team I ran with the juniors back in 2011, and also do some off-road events as well, which has been pretty cool.
So with the World Rally Championship, that's Rally 3 you've been driving in, is that correct?
Yes.
And Estonia and the Acropolis Greek Rally,
yes.
they're the two you went to?
And
in Finland as well, right. So you can just sort of duck in and out of those, can you? They must think very highly of you just to let you pop in.
Yeah, I mean, I had a great program and some great supporters who are also partners of the World Championship. And the Rally 3 car you mentioned that we drove is a brand new car that had just been developed, and it will run as the junior category for next year. So these events were really about showcasing the car and getting some miles and getting the car out there. So it was a great opportunity, a win-win. I was around and these events were on the table. So it was a pretty cool opportunity to be able to combine it all and get some World Rally Championship events back in, because it had been a while since I'd been able to compete over there. I
think I heard you say that you had a poster of the Acropolis Rally in your home when you were a kid, and to go there was pretty special. But isn't Finland the one? It's like I don't know.
Yeah, Finland's the mecca. It's the Monaco of rallying. It's the one event I think every driver wants to win. Rallying is almost the national sport over in Finland. So the atmosphere and the roads are just unlike anything else you'll see anywhere. They're just the way that they're built. It's kind of like a roller coaster with these incredible jumps. Yeah, it's just it's unreal. It's very hard to describe, but it takes your breath away for sure.
This year I've made the big mistake of getting a KO subscription, which means I'm now watching World Rally Championship, MotoGP, Formula One, and my wife and kids are like, "Would you turn that down?" the whole time. I can't get enough of it. And the characters in the World Rally Championship, I really recommend it. It's great viewing, and from Wales and all the Scandinavian drivers, and I'm just waiting to see you up in the Rally 1 driving. Is that the ultimate goal for you, do you think, or what's next for Molly if you could have your wish?
Yeah. I mean, as a rally driver, to compete at the top of the WRC is always the pinnacle. I think it's a very long road to get there that not many people get to achieve. So certainly would like to go as high up as I can, and would never say no to that opportunity. But there's a lot. It's a bit like trying to get to Formula One. There's a lot of steps and a lot of resources that are needed to get to that point. And also I've just been doing some more off-roading stuff this year as well, which is a discipline I really hadn't had much involvement in, and I'm really enjoying that as well. So it's been a really cool year to be doing rallying, but also these other types of motorsport as well, and really diversify. So I think there's a lot of opportunities, but it's really hit home, how much, you can try to plan your career as perfectly as you can, but really you've got to be there and got to make the most of every opportunity and take everything that comes your way and run with it and see where it leads you. And I couldn't have predicted last year a year like this would have ever existed. So I'm kind of excited to see, I don't know what will happen next year, but I'm going to be there and try everything as hard as I can and see what happens.
Well, you're currently leading the Extreme E series, I believe, with Johan Kristoffersen. Is that finished? Have you won that, or you still got a battle to go?
We have one more round to go.
Okay. But you're in a good spot, I gather.
Yeah, we have the lead, so it's between us and one other team. So the fight's definitely still on. So we can't relax. We're in a good position, but anything can happen at these events. They're so unpredictable, which is what makes it exciting. But it's a challenge as well. So that's our goal, to win, and that's what we're going to try and go and do. But we just got to keep our heads down and keep focused on the task at hand.
And there's a little bit of cool factor hanging around there, I gather, because there's a lot of Formula One, ex-Formula One drivers. It's Jenson Button and Rosberg's, of course, who you race with. And so you're hanging out with some, pretty good friends.
Yeah, it's incredible, the drivers and the personnel that Extreme E have put together for this series. So we have from the rally side, Carlos Sainz, Sebastian Loeb, and my idol growing up, and from the Formula One side, as you say, Lewis Hamilton has a team. My boss is Nico Rosberg, and he's coming to all the events, so that's pretty cool. Jenson Button has another team. And in Greenland, I was, on the start line, and next to me on the start line was Sebastian Loeb, who's been my idol growing up. So I could have never imagined there would be any kind of reality where I'd be lining up in a final side by side with Sebastian Loeb. So it is like going into another world.
Yeah, well, a bit of networking's never bad for business. You never know where it can lead. The other thing I've noticed is you've got a bit of a media career going as well, which no doubt has sprung from some of these opportunities. And you can obviously string a sentence together, and you're in the pit lanes at the supercars sometimes, I think, and doing some other stuff, including the SAS Australia that I just wanted to ask you about in finishing, because again, I've only just sort of gotten onto SAS this year and have watched a couple of the Australian events, and I've actually been horrified how hard and horrible it is. Is it as horrible as it looks on TV?
Oh, it's worse. It's worse than it looks. It was the most brutal thing I've ever done. Yeah, it was really, really hard to kind of put into words just how brutal it was. But what you see on TV is brutal, but there's no, when that task is over or whatever, it doesn't end. To those tasks, you're hiking to and from all those tasks. You're in these army trucks driving to those tasks. And when we did it, it was in the middle of winter in Jindabyne when they had a cold snap and blizzards and all sorts of things coming through. So you're literally shivering during the night with the wind coming through the room where we were staying, in the morning in the cars, going through all those tasks, jumping in water, I think every day bar 1 or 2. You were cold and hungry all the time. And then you're doing all those tasks on top of everything else. So it was, the most demanding thing for sure that I've ever had to do. But such an amazing experience to be able to put yourself through that and really learn a lot about yourself and then put everything after that into perspective.
It must be, you go in there and you think, well, this is just a game, so, how bad can it be? But then they start screaming, yelling at you from the word go, and you're immersed in it. I guess it becomes your reality for that couple of weeks.
Yeah, after the first day, you don't even know there's cameras there because you're just trying to survive. And I think that's the great thing about the show is it's so real and there's no producers, there's no cut. The DS are running the show and they're running the selection as if they would, in the real deal. If the camera guys miss something too bad, we're not pandering or doing anything for them. They're doing their thing and they're giving us the most real and genuine, authentic experience of that selection and trying to get the most out of us. And the camera guys are just along for the ride. So it's everything you see is as real as it gets, and there's a whole lot more that I guess is on the chopping room floor.
Well, I know you're someone who takes their fitness very seriously, and you're obviously a very, very driven, focused person. So did you learn something new about yourself in that experience?
Yeah, I learned a huge amount physically and mentally. I think, some of those physical tasks, you really, you're at the point where you don't think you can take another step. And then you're staying at that point for an hour or more, for hours. And so it's incredible to really learn what your limits actually are. If you're put in that scenario and you have to do more, you can. So learning those things of what you would have thought up until that point, the limit is, or going past a limit. And then the amount you go past that again is just, it's incredible. I don't think it's something you want to do every day, but it's very empowering to know just what you can do if you have to.
Well, it's a couple of years of pretty amazing experiences you've had, Molly. And have you got any tips for what might be happening next year, or not ready to announce anything? Your colleague alluded to the fact there was something in the offing, but I didn't know whether it was something you can announce
there
yet.
is lots of things in the pipeline, and the announcements aren't far away. So not yet, but very soon we'll be able to talk about it.
All right. Well, I'll keep my ears peeled, and I'm sure whatever you're doing next year, I'll be watching. And good luck. I hope you crash less and win more than the.
It's always the plan.
But can't wait to see that you've won the Extreme E Series with Johan and the Rosberg team, and I hope you have a great year next year. And it's been awesome to talk to you. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Hi, I'm Molly Taylor, rally driver and Extreme E driver, and I hope you enjoyed my chat with Harry here on the Real Risk podcast.
Well, that's the show for today. Thanks for joining me. If you want any more information, you can check out the podcast website at realriskpodcast.com.